You may have heard of the game mechanic, I cut, you choose. Well, Cutterland relies on that mechanic in a way that is ridiculous, that I've never seen done before. Because you will actually physically cut the components and then the other players will choose the components that you cut. In particular here we're gonna cut these cards that represent different possible configurations of terrain and monsters and other features such as towers or bridges or fences. We're going to cut them and then we're going to use them to create our fantasy world. The game comes with scissors because again we need to cut things, and at the end of the game everybody will score all the things, all the features in their fantasy world. And the player with the highest score wins the game. So each player will have a hand of cards, and when it is your turn, and players will take turns being the active player. When it is your turn being the active player, you take a card, you take your scissors, and you cut the piece in a number of pieces equal to the number of players. So if you're playing with 4, I need to cut it in 4 pieces. If you're playing with 3 pieces. Everybody should have one. So suppose that is one thing that I want to do, and this is another thing that I want to do. Any shape is good, as long as, you don't make it silly, as long as you don't cut diagonally. And you have to imagine these as a grid of 4 by 3 squares, and sometimes it's pretty obvious. Sometimes playing with younger players, I wish that there was a little bit of a grid outline there. And so, for example, I decided I want to do it this way. I want to do it this way. I want to do it this way. I could do it this way for the sake of it. Booyah. Once I have the 4 pieces, remember, I cut, you choose. Then players go around and each player takes a piece, and the player who cut them is left with the last one. And now another player goes, and incidentally I think I got a card of the same kind. Just for the sake of this simplification, I'm going to choose a different one. Incidentally, yes, I started playing with the deck assuming they were shuffled, and I was like, these cards all look like the same. So you may want to shuffle them, because I destroyed a couple of cards of a kind before I realized that that was not a good idea. That was not a great idea. So I do this, and then I do that, and then my opponent does that, for example. Now, the first piece that is added to your land is just it's there in front of you. When you add other pieces, they have to touch by at least an edge. They cannot just touch, by a corner. And so, for example, that would be a legal thing. That would be legal. So you kind of have to reconstruct the grid. And again, I think if there had been a grid there, that would have been nice. And suppose, I know they come from the same cards, but suppose that this is how the piece that I received after a while. When you place these symbols here, then you take the corresponding tokens from the supply, and they will be placed on your fantasy land at the end of the game. These are towers that will protect some of your creatures from being eaten by dragons and krakens. And these can be either fences, when you place them in between edges, like that. And can also be bridges, connecting different lands. So, for example, now those are connected because bridge. And I can rotate. Again, I have a couple of things that I need to fulfill. So suppose that after a while, that is kind of how my board looks, which may or may not be a great board. Again, at the end, once everybody has built their own fantasy land, we're going to place our things. I'm going to place a tower there because I have it, and I'm going to place another tower here because I have it, and so on and so forth. The bridge, I don't need the bridge, just for the sake of placing it. So, once I have my fantasy land, well, first thing, the krakens get hungry and they're gonna eat. They're gonna devour every creature in the 8 spaces around them, diagonally and orthogonally, unless they're protected by a tower. They can even reach further if in fact you're using a bridge then to connect that to an area. Now that Kraken has just eaten that toad, for example. And it's good for you because creatures that are eaten by krakens, and suppose that we are like that, and so like that, creatures eaten by krakens will score you points at the end of the game. After the krakens eat, the dragons go. So the krakens just grab everything around them, including across bridges. The dragons, each dragon only eats one creature in the same region in which they are, as defined by terrain. So that turtle is gone now. So after dragons and krakens eat, it's time for us to score, and there is a very nice player aid here. It tells us that, again, the krakens will score 2 victory points for each creature they devour. The goblins, big party goers, so they party in the desert, so they got their own Burning Man going on there. And if an area, again, has one goblin, it's 2 victory points, and the more goblins you put together, up to 4, perfect party. More than that, they're not worth as many victory points. Centaurs like big areas to roam, so the centaur will score you a point in an area, 1 point per square that an area is worth. But again, they are not particularly sociable, so multiple centaurs in the same area don't score you anything. So the optimal way to use them is 1 per large area. The dragons, each dragon devours a non-dragon creature, and then they are romantic. How else can I say? You score 7 points for each area with exactly 2, no more no less, dragons, exactly 2. So right now the dragon is worth absolutely nothing because it's all alone. Sad. Turtles, however, really like solitude. You score 10 points if there's only 1 turtle in all of your land, regardless of regions. Again, regions are defined by terrain. 2, if there are 5 points if there's 2 of them anywhere. 3 if there's more than that. Toads are worth -2 victory points. That's why you really want to feed them to the krakens as much as possible. Like that, they would both get eaten, and that would prevent me the penalty from having toads, and would give me 2 points, because that's how the kraken scores me points. So, cut the cards, let other people choose, get the last that was left to you, get better choice when it is other people cutting cards, and you continue like this until all cards assigned during setup have been cut and distributed, and they have been turned into fantasy lands. That is when the krakens and the dragons feed. Before that, actually, that is when you place your tokens. Big animals feed, score victory points, play with the highest score wins the game. The game is light, fun, but still with enough strategy to keep people interested. The mechanic may seem gimmicky and I think it would have been unthinkable until maybe 10, 15 years ago. But now between legacy games and the stunning success of roll and write games, I guess we became used to the idea of a game that comes with a limited number of plays already inscribed in the components, and a game that is gradually destroyed as you continue. There is something fun and interesting and very visceral in that. But you saw that big stack of cards, so you can definitely get a number of plays out of this. And I'm thinking, actually, if you save the cut components, I'm almost wondering if you can then play it as a drafting game of the pick and pass variety. You just put those pieces face down, shuffle on the table, and players will grab a hand of those, choose one, pass, get from the other player, and then continue until you got your fantasy land, then you score it. I think that could be fun. I'm definitely going to try that. I'm definitely going to save at least a number of these. Because again, you're going to get quite a bunch of them. The game can also be played solo, although the box doesn't say so, but I like playing games solo, so I figured out a way, which worked for me, which is I get the same number of cards that I would get with 2 players. Then I cut in 4 pieces, and I use a D4 to select what my opponent would select. So I cut the 4 pieces, roll a die, because the opponent always chooses first. I'm a gentleman that way. Then I take 1, then I roll a die for the opponent taking another piece, and I draw, and I take the remaining 1. those are discarded, so I have 2 pieces per round, and I just play against my previous score. And I enjoyed that way. I figured out, that I enjoy playing it that way. I was training myself, and then I played it with my kids, and they also enjoyed it. Because again, there's something pretty fun. And the young one, again, figuring out exactly where the square was okay, but that was not always super easy. That's why I think it would be great to have like a really, no matter how faint, so it's unobtrusive, it still looks good. But there would be nothing wrong. We play games with grids on all the time, so I would prefer if they had the 3x4 grid. But again, no big deal that they don't have it. And the game just looks fun, and those creatures, there's like big pixel art, is very charming, is nostalgia for me, is exotic for my kids, and it's just fun to see the Kraken grabbing monsters and my kids making all sorts of inappropriate jokes about the dragons, only 2 of them making babies and stuff. There's a certain silliness to the goblins partying in the desert, and again, the dragons making babies, the whole thing. A certain silliness and lightheartedness to the thing, which of course is perfectly fine. I play a lot of games with very serious, deep, resonant themes, and from time to time, just cutting a card and seeing those goblins partying together. Oh no, until a Kraken is one of them. But plot twist, one of them has a protection. Booyah. It's fun, it's light, it's simple. And again, I like tile laying games, and the fact that now we have shapes that change every time doesn't feel gimmicky at all. To me, it's a fun, interesting new way of approaching the puzzle of tile laying games, which I like very much. And there is usually less variance that you can have here, in which you can get a piece that is 1 square. If that's what you cut, and that's really what you maybe needed, then you make that really sucky so other people don't get it. Or most likely you will want to get most pieces to be more or less the same, but of course what that means changes from player to player. From time to time, after you cut, you get what you get, and most likely you don't, but then you get a better pick. And again, that loop, that cycling around, getting better pick, terrible, not so bad, etc., 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 is part of the experience also. So you have a game that is super simple, super light, innovative, but not gimmicky, because I really feel that the idea of cutting the cards gives you unusual pieces, gives you interesting decisions as you're cutting, and then simply offers people different things to choose from and to decide about every time. The scoring system, you have enough things to score, then again, you got different ways to go, but not too many that the game feels overwhelming, and this is why it remains a great family game and a game that you can play with casual players also. Cutterland! It's original, it's new, and it's really fun.